Today, I'm really excited to have Dave from SmartTrucking with me. This is a conversation I've been looking forward to for a few weeks, and finally we have a chance to get together. So welcome on My Trucking View, Dave.
Thank you, Sergey. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, for sure. I've been watching your channel for a long time. We worked together on some co-branding and sponsorships for GP Transco, and I mean, it's one of my, definitely by far my favorite and most informative YouTube channels about trucking. So I really appreciate all that stuff that you guys do.
Well, thank you for saying so. Thank you.
Yeah,
it's nice to be hooked up with a really good carrier such as yourselves.
I appreciate it. I really do. So let's start by start at the beginning. So you are the face essentially of SmartTrucking and the host. Is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm. I try to get Kathy to come on with me, but she rarely does, if ever.
Mm-hmm. And you guys are married and you kind of run this thing together.
Yes, that's right.
And your son participates periodically.
That's right as well. He's our head engineer and chief idea guy.
So going all the way to the beginning, and I don't know how long ago that was, but maybe you can tell me a little bit about how did you get into the trucking industry to begin with?
When I was in high school, I worked at a warehouse and loading dock on after school and on weekends and stuff. And I went from driving the fork truck to shunting the trailers, the highway trailers in and out of the doors and just shunting around the yard. And I always enjoyed anything that moved, anything with wheels, anything like that. I like driving stuff, and it just kind of kept going from there. Mm-hmm. I stayed in school and would go trucking on the weekends and stuff like that, just for my job, for a part-time job and a summer job.
Mm-hmm. So how old were you when you first really full-time over the road type of work began?
I started doing that when I was 16, but there were insurance issues here in Ontario, and I ended up moving out to Alberta where they had no such issues. And I did a lot of trucking out there until I got older, until I was old enough to be insured by everyone here in Ontario.
Were you an owner operator from the start, or did you drive as a company driver for a while and then bought your own truck? How did that go?
No, I was a company driver for many years before I took the plunge and bought my first truck. And we bought our first truck in 1984. And since 1984, we've been owner operators after that, to the point where we ended up getting our own operating authority. I couldn't even tell you when that was, how many years ago, but it was just, just a natural progression. We just got into the need to make more and more money because we wanted to, and we ended up going that way, buying our own equipment. We lucked into a really good customer, and we just went from there.
I'm sure you remember. What kind of truck was it, the first truck you bought?
It was a Kenworth. It was a W900 Kenworth.
Yeah. How long did you have that one for?
That first one, we kept it 9 years, and it was a good truck for the whole 9 years we kept it. And then it got to the stage where we were looking at having to in-frame the motor, and we decided to go for a second new truck, and we bought another Kenworth and replaced the first one. And after that,
So you were a company driver since you were pretty much a kid. You eventually, I guess, became an owner operator, bought your own truck, and sort of kept buying different trucks. Were you ever a multi-truck carrier yourself, or was it always a one truck at a time type of thing?
Yes, and I can't even tell you what year that was. I hauled produce directly for a buyer in Toronto, and he was busy, and he said, I'd take a few more trucks if I could get them. I had a friend of mine that was an owner operator. We bought a second trailer for him to pull, put him on my authority, and it just kind of grew from there. We got to the point where we were 15 trucks, and we ran that for about 10 years, and then reevaluated the whole thing and decided to sell off what we had and just go back to a one truck operation.
Are you driving now?
No.
How long has it been?
A couple of years now.
A couple of years. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So now predominantly you do production, video, and stuff like that, basically, for SmartTrucking.
That's right. Yes.
Okay. Do you miss it at all?
I do and I don't. Like I've kept my last truck, and I still go for joyrides in it because I enjoy driving the truck. I miss the driving, but the industry itself anymore, no, I don't miss it. I don't miss going through customs and that type of thing, you know.
Yeah, I'm not sure how different it is, just the industry as a whole in Canada versus the United States. Is it a lot different? Is it nearly the same?
It's a lot different. The United States is far more advanced in trucking than Canada is. So I did the majority of my trucking in the States just because it was so much better there than up here.
In terms of like regulations or?
Oh, in terms of all regulations, money, the type of equipment, the axle weights allowed, the hours of service. I could go on and on. The truck stops here are terrible. They're almost non-existent, and they're terrible, the ones that are here. So mostly if you run across Canada in a truck, they're unmanned fuel stops, and you get the occasional one with like a little variety store attached to it or something like that. But it's very difficult even to get hot food. And once the mom and the pop truck stops up here started drying up and disappearing, there's hardly anywhere to eat now. Most guys up here now carry their own food all the time.
Oh, I had no idea, to be honest, because we run to Canada very rarely, and we don't do a whole lot of work there. So that's news to me. So moving to SmartTrucking, how many years ago did that whole thing begin?
When I was running California by myself, I would take pictures of all the fancy trucks. And Kathy started putting them on the internet maybe 12 or 14 years ago, something like that. And then she wanted to make the occasional video for her. She thought Facebook was going to be something. So I made the occasional video just to make her laugh. I wasn't worried about an audience or anything like that. Just to make her laugh, get a chuckle out of her. I'd get on there and bitch about something or rant about something that was bugging me in the industry. And our son Nick put Kathy onto YouTube. He said, you know, this is going to be the platform where everyone is going to be. And she just kind of went with that, and I guess Nick was right.
So your wife predicted the success of Facebook, and your son predicted the success of YouTube. That's pretty impressive. I'm not going to lie.
Kathy ran when we were trucking. I ran the trucks, but she ran all the computer equipment and stuff. So she had a pretty good feel for all of that stuff, and so did my son Nick. So
were you and her ever on the road together?
No, I tried to talk her into coming with me on the road. She would do like an annual shopping trip to California with me or something like that. But no, she wouldn't do it. She wasn't interested in that.
Okay, so it started as basically putting together videos for fun for your wife and kind of sending them to her, and she found them entertaining and thought others might like it, so she started to upload them herself into social media and stuff like that. Do you remember when you really started to see some traction of subscribers and an audience base growing on SmartTrucking?
I never paid that much attention to it, so I couldn't tell you, but maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I know when she finally got around to teaching me how to find YouTube and showing me us on YouTube, that back then there was nobody else doing what we were doing, which I remember noticing that anyway and thinking that was kind of odd. With the people that were watching, Kathy was surprised how many people were asking questions about how to do this or how to do that, and that was how we found out that there was like a large void out there of people trying to get into the industry but didn't understand how the truck worked or anything like that. They were just curious.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, what kind of opening did you see sort of in the market when you started out? But starting out that long ago, I guess in YouTube years, that's a long time. I guess, yeah, there was not a whole lot out there. Were there any other channels in trucking at the time? I can't even remember.
There was a guy posting truck pictures named Hank something or other, and he was posting pictures, but he didn't do any videos, I don't think. And other than him, I guess we were the first to my knowledge anyway.
One of the things I really love about your channel, and then a few other ones, I would say Trucking Answers is probably another one that I really like for that reason, is there is absolutely no drama. There is zero drama whatsoever.
We just avoid it like the plague. I'm not interested in anything like that. I'm embarrassed for the industry about some of the channels that are on there, and that's just not what I'm interested in at all. I just, just not my thing. Don't want to know it. Don't want to get involved in it. Don't want to hear it.
I wonder, what does that look like through the eyes of somebody who is just considering coming into the industry, and then they watch your channel and it's informative, and then they watch a handful of other channels and it's a polar opposite of anything
I'm
like
sure
it.
that stuff hurts us as an industry, which is part of the reason I don't care for it.
I research all day long. Half of what I do is probably research and learn still. I've been in the industry for only 3 years and I'm constantly looking at how to improve different things we can offer our drivers. So I read and I listen and I watch all the time. And a reoccurring theme is the whole idea of, if you drive an automatic, you shouldn't be a truck driver in the first place. You hear that all the time. And to me, that seems like problematic in terms of, it's going to discourage a ton of people from entering the industry, in an industry where a large portion of veteran drivers are retiring in the next 3, 4, 5 years. And inevitably, these people will need to be replaced with a new generation of drivers. And if it is the case that a lot of people come into the industry driving an automatic, how do we go about not scaring them off, especially when this idea is kind of pretty popular out there?
About not having the automatic transmissions?
Yeah, the idea of basically, well, if you're going to drive an automatic, you might as well not bother becoming a truck driver. What do you think about that as a whole, of discouraging people in that way?
I think one of the most encouraging things to bring new people into the industry are the automatic transmissions. Just because when you're a new guy learning to drive one of these things, there's so much to focus on. But if you're not looking for gears, that's one big less thing that you have to worry about. So I think it makes it easier. I think that encourages new drivers to come. And the last guy, a friend of mine that I was working for a couple of years ago, the guy I just retired from, he was buying automatic transmissions simply because he couldn't find people anymore that knew how to drive the standards. So I think it's a boon to the industry, frankly, to have them. I know as a carrier they're more expensive for you to purchase, and I don't know how well they stand up after a few years. But I think it attracts new people to the industry.
I mean, from a carrier side, there's a ton of benefit, even if it's more expensive from the initial investment. I mean, fuel savings is a huge thing for a carrier. We have 450 trucks, and a tiny percentage shift one way, that's a huge savings that we can pass on to drivers. So basically, when our drivers tell us, why don't you have manuals, a lot of time we'll say, well, if we had manuals, we would not be able to pay you as well as we do, because the money has to go somewhere. So we'd rather pass it on to you and get automatics. I mean, that's the way we describe it.
Perfect answer.
Right. Yeah. So today, do you know off the top of your head, how many views do you guys get on SmartTrucking, let's say monthly?
For views monthly, I couldn't tell you. Kathy told me the other day that we were over 150,000 subscribers.
Wow.
So I guess that's good.
Are you the #1 channel right now, I believe, in subscribers for trucking?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know.
People must recognize you here and there, right? I mean, that's a big audience. When you're out on the street, the drivers might run into you and say, oh, that's Dave. Does that happen much?
We live in a really small town. The population here is about 5,000 people. Oh. And I didn't think anybody up here watched YouTube, but I was surprised how many times people would come up to me and say, hey, you're on YouTube now, or something like that. So I was flattered and embarrassed all at the same time.
It must be a shift, like from basically being a regular guy to a guy with 150,000 subscribers. Like the mentality you must have, now compared to before. How do you see things differently as a result? Do you kind of watch what you say more? Do you research more because more people are going to hear what it is that you're saying? What's that like for you?
Honestly, I don't think Kathy probably have a different answer, but I don't think it's changed me at all. I was always interested in the trucking industry. So I always kind of kept up with it. And I just always generally called a spade. And if something was bugging me, like something the FMCSA had done or something like that, I had no problem vocalizing it, I guess. So I don't think it's changed me particularly.
So I watch your channel a good amount, and to me, it comes off more educational than anything. So it seems to me that in another life you would be a teacher or something along those lines. Is that something you've considered back, back in the day, maybe going into education? Because you seem to have a thing for it.
Well, actually, that's Kathy's influence. She was a teacher,
Mhm.
and both my parents were teachers. Her dad was a teacher, and she felt there was a need because all these people were asking all these questions. They would write in or phone in and wanted to know stuff. So she decided that there was a whole group out there that needed help with everything from sliding axles to you name it.
Mhm.
Because I guess the trucking schools, I didn't go through a trucking school, but I guess a lot of the trucking schools just teach you as much as you need to get your CDL and then kick you out the door. And there's thousands of guys out there that really don't understand how to back up or really don't, they did it for 100 feet in the truck stop parking lot for their test or something like that. But, there's a whole group of guys that want to learn more, that want to be better at their jobs. But
Mhm.
for me, it was easy because I just followed the old guys around when I was young and learned from watching them and talking to them. But it's a different culture now.
Mhm.
So I just thought, if I could help these guys, I'll try to do that.
I'm trying to put myself in your position. You're very experienced in the craft of trucking and all those different things. So you have a lot of experience and people come to you or they come to your channel for different information. And you put out some kind of information about best practices for A, B, and C. And let's say 70,000 people watch the video.
Mhm.
And 3 weeks later, you realize you actually got something wrong and misinformed somebody of something. Does that ever happen? How do you handle something like that?
I've been lucky in that I've stumbled seldom that I'm aware of.
Mhm.
So and if I say something there that I want to retract, I'll retract it in a future video or something like that. But I've had very little of that. I've been lucky that way.
Shifting gears to the current industry and the driver's perception of the industry. Today, what are some things you think trucking companies need to understand in terms of the driver's overall mindset of the industry? What can they do better on in order to appeal to drivers in a way that drivers can relate to and that sort of thing?
Geez, I could go on for 20 minutes about that. But drivers talk more than you think they do, and they still communicate. CBs anymore. They still communicate, even the new guys, more than you think they do. So most guys, in my estimation, by the time they've been in this industry a year, they know who the good carriers are and they know who the bad carriers are because carriers never really change. Like if you look at those big mega carriers, they're still doing the same things wrong that they were 20 years ago, and that sort of follows the industry, where it's all reputation is an important thing for carriers out here, and so many of them have burned that bridge. And then you see carriers like U.S. Express now trying to come back with this variant division that they're trying to start, but it's too late. Those guys have already cooked their gooses because of the way they handled their drivers for the last 20 years. Whereas if you get a good carrier with a good reputation, such as GP Transco would be my guess that they've never been a crap carrier and then moved to a good carrier. They've been a good carrier all along. And guys get to learn that. Guys get to know that. And it doesn't take that long for the word to spread. I'd hazard a guess that everybody in Illinois knows who GP Transco is and that they're a good carrier.
We're kind of the best kept secret in a way that we were good company, but really outside of Illinois, not a whole lot of people knew about us. And at the time, we were predominantly a owner operator carrier. So we had an authority and we worked really well with owner operators. And then like 3 years ago, we decided to have a bigger shift to the company driver asset side because that means we can service our dedicated customers in a more reliable way, basically. With company drivers, we sort of done a ton of research and grabbed the best of what we saw in dozens of carriers and tried to leave out as much as the stuff we didn't like. So it's not like we weren't great for a long time. It's that we kind of intentionally started out looking at where others failed and where they succeeded and sort of just meshed it all together. But the funny thing is, even if you're a pretty good carrier, and I mean, we're not the only good carrier out there. There are other companies that treat drivers fairly and pay them well and so on. The problem seems to be that in marketing material and public relations material that companies are putting out at drivers, all the carriers are saying the same thing. No matter whether they're really good or they're just pretending to be, they're going to end up saying the same thing, which is we pay drivers well, we treat them with respect. We say it and we mean it. Somebody else might say it. And on their end, it might be just wishful thinking. How do drivers discern? How can they discern truth from BS, in your opinion, in those kinds of situations?
As I said, I think drivers communicate with each other more than you realize. So aside from Swift attracting guys fresh out of school, I think most guys in this industry already know who are the carriers that are blowing smoke and who's throwing in fluff and who honestly is treating their people well because they hear it. They can see your equipment in the truck stops when your guys land, and they see it's not full of dents and stuff like that, and the rubber's all good. And drivers see more than you think they do. I don't think too many carriers attract drivers by lying to them. And if they have, those guys figure it out in 6 months and they're gone anyway. So, you know, I don't see carrier fluff as being a real, I don't see that would hurt you very much, because I think most guys can see through the bull pretty quickly.
You know what? I also noticed that there's sort of a detriment that this carries, because the idea is there are a million choices and it's a driver's buying market, right? So the market is there because drivers can find a job overnight if they wanted to. Every carrier basically is welcoming drivers with open arms, right? As long as they're pretty safe. But that makes it harder to choose where to go. And also, I think what it does is, like, we've had situations where a driver joins us, and let's say they were like hesitant to come aboard because they've been hurt before, and they come aboard, and on the first month, something goes wrong. Like a standard, maybe they had to wait a little bit longer at a dedicated customer because they had something at their facility. It's trucking, it happens. But sometimes drivers take it as, okay, see, that's proof that this carrier is just like any other, and then they leave as soon as one thing might go wrong because they're so on edge and they're constantly testing you as a carrier. Do you see that yourself?
I can see where that might happen. I understand what you're saying exactly, because there is such a hesitancy these days by a lot of the guys to trust carriers anymore, because a lot of them have been bent over 5 or 6 times already, and they're just fed up and frustrated. But I think a carrier that does what he says, says what he does, and just straight shoots all the way down the line, doesn't blow the drivers any smoke, gives them a raise whenever they can, and just be dead honest with them. Mm-hmm. Because drivers are so sick of being lied to that they just, they can smell it coming a mile away. And just, good dispatchers, I think that's a great way to battle that. If you have an honest dispatch team that communicates well with your drivers, I think that's half the battle right there.
On that topic, so besides being lied to, what are some of the main reasons, if you can think of some, the drivers change companies in your experience?
Some drivers think you're there to be their friend, and that the carrier works for the driver. And I think you're always going to get guys like that. I don't know how you would avoid that, but I think most truck drivers understand that the carriers need to make money too. They'll accommodate you as best they can, but it's got to be a win-win for everybody. So I think as long as the carrier is just being honest and says, we thought you were going to get home for the weekend, your load fell through, we haven't been able to find anything else, we're sorry, and just be open with them, because stuff is going to happen. It's just the way of the industry.
It's tricky, actually. You're right. And that's a very interesting way to look at it, because we internally, when we're looking at like customer service as a company, we have 2 types of customer service. We have customer service for our contracted customers, and we have customer service for our drivers, because we try to treat our drivers as much as we can as customers. And one of the reasons that we do that is because it's really difficult to convey to a fleet of 450 drivers that we really are on the same team. Like without one, there wouldn't be another. Because at the office, we see it that way. We see it as this is just a department, like there's an accounting department, there is a driver department. And each one is necessary to provide service to the customers, because that's what we're all here for, just for that, to provide service to the customer. So I keep trying to kind of figure out like what's a good way to really, because when you tell a driver we're on the same team, they think you're just saying that. But we really believe that. So that's just kind of something we struggle with, internally. How do we really convey that as a truth to our drivers?
That's interesting. I would think that over a period of time, the drivers would get to know that that's the case. But, maybe in the first couple of months, they're just so trigger sensitive that it becomes an issue. But something else, let me ask you, because you'll know the answer to this. All sorts of drivers have customers that treat them poorly. Yeah. Do you ever have an issue that way? Because we when we had our own little trucking deal, we were fortunate enough that we knew our customers personally, and they wouldn't talk down to our drivers, and they were nice people to deal with. But even a carrier of your size has got to be getting into some pretty big shippers and manufacturers. And I would think that if you could train your customers to treat your drivers well, it would really help. I don't know if you can do that or not.
We have the benefit of being somewhat selective when it comes to customers. So it's kind of a full circle. We are able to pay our drivers more because as a result, we are able to hire better drivers. And that means we can provide a better service for customers. So we can be a little bit more competitive on the cost. So
that's a nice situation to be in.
Yeah, so we can be a little bit more competitive in terms of not the cheapest trucking company out there, for, cost-wise to the customer, but our on-time rate and professionalism and everything is through the roof, right? So as a result, we can also be a little bit more selective in how we communicate with the customer, and we have some more flexibility that we can be more open and honest about the facility, for example, where our drivers go to pick up or receive, the receiver or shipper. And this came out a lot during the COVID pandemic because for a while, nobody knew what to do. Like nobody knew protocols for like sanitizing or for distancing or whatever. So we had to call customers ourselves one by one to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And if they weren't, we would say, okay, give us a call when you're ready. And when you're up to standard, and then we'll start sending drivers there again. So that does happen. But in other cases, let's say there's a large customer and their facility in the wintertime is a mess. Like it's got slush all over the place and drivers hate it. And that's unfortunate. But at the same time, if they're a huge customer and they are one of the main customers that like allowed us to run seamlessly through COVID without laying anyone off, we can't just turn our back on that customer, because at the end of the day, our drivers, our CEO, everybody, we're here for the customer ultimately. Sure. So it's kind of a dance and balance you have to do, because you don't want to lose a customer. You don't want to lose drivers either. And both are really difficult to.
And there's only so far you can try to coax a customer, I'm sure, before he gets annoyed. You don't want to ever hit that point. So
if we shift a little bit to talk about technology, we've talked about the fact we ordered 2 Tesla semi-trucks that are still on hold, and they're going to be arriving here sometime in the future. We really don't know when. So electric trucks are definitely something that I think we're going to be seeing more of. Hydrogen trucks maybe is another thing that's something interesting to look at. I actually interviewed somebody from Pilot Flying J on this show last week, and he was talking about the things that they're doing to sort of future-proof themselves. But what are some interesting technologies that you come across that you think are going to be, important today or in the future in this industry?
Well, I would agree with you on the electric trucks. I think that's just the way of the future for trucking. It's just a matter of when, not if. Some of the other concepts they like to bat around, like platooning, for instance, or even the autonomous trucks. If we see that, in my opinion, we won't see that in my lifetime. Like I've got a brand new Tahoe outside, and unfortunately, it came with all this stuff on it, and you can't even get the sensors to work right on that thing in a snowstorm. The weather messes it up. So I can't possibly imagine crawling into the bunk of a truck in bad weather and just kind of crossing my fingers and hoping the truck doesn't make any mistakes, you know. So I don't see that in the near future, but I do see electric trucks being on the horizon here. So, and I read something the other day, in fact, that more women in Europe are interested in getting into trucking with the electric trucks coming on board over there. And even the semi-autonomous trucks, more women are interested in trucking for a living all of a sudden over there. And I'm not sure why that, they just have a different perception, but geez, in the United States and Canada, I forget the percentage of the workforce in trucking that's women, but it's very, very low.
I think it's 6. So I know we're 3% above the average and we're at 9 at GP Transco. So I think it's 6 in the US, I'm pretty sure.
But if electric trucks and automatic trucks can encourage women into the industry, man, I think that'd be a great thing.
When it comes to the automation of fleets, like autonomous trucks or mostly autonomous trucks, I was always under the assumption that it's not going to be the technology that prevents it from happening soon. It's going to be more the public fear and public perception and the legislation behind it, I think. I wonder how long it'll take for people to just be completely comfortable with unmanned automobiles rolling down the street.
Yeah.
Just that
That's
idea.
An interesting question, because I don't think most people even look up in trucks from their cars to see if anybody's driving the thing or not. You could probably have autonomous trucks running on the interstates and nobody would even notice. But I wonder, like, how those things are going to get insurance and what's going to happen. There are going to be crashes no matter what. So what happens then? Whose fault is it in an accident, and how all that scenario will play out? So I think there's some serious hurdles for autonomous trucks. I don't think the public is anywhere near ready for it yet. But I don't know if you saw the article last year in the Phoenix Sun about the autonomous cars down in Phoenix, and people had deliberately decided that they didn't like them in these neighborhoods and would deliberately set up like little things on the street to throw the car a curve, for instance, if the car didn't know how to handle and stuff. And their perception obviously wasn't good. They weren't happy that these autonomous trucks were cutting through their neighborhoods where their kids played on the streets and stuff, you know. I don't think the public is very aware of autonomous trucks or the technology coming along with them right now. I think once they become more aware of it, if the media decides to make it a big thing, I think the general public will be terrified. And if the media decides not to run with it, and they just kind of downplay it, we might get away more easily.
But I'm thinking of airplanes. I mean, to be honest, the last 150 years were like an insane, revolution of technology. We had no idea 100 years ago or however long ago that we can possibly see an object as heavy as an airplane flying through the air. And somehow we got used to that idea very quickly. So I guess maybe we have some flexibility mentally more than we maybe give ourselves credit for. That's also possible, I guess. Right?
I would agree. The technology is incredible anymore. And if the public can accept that, the technology is safe, like an airplane or an airliner, I'm sure they'll be, 80% fine with it. But, it's all how they decide to perceive it.
Do viewers ask you about that a lot? Like, is automation going to leave me out of a job?
A lot of guys looking to get into the trucking industry ask me that. And they'll be partway through CDL school or something like that. We get all sorts of that, wanting to know if they're wasting their time and their money because autonomous trucks are going to replace them anyway in a year or two. That's a big thing on new drivers' minds, I would say.
And you usually tell them not to worry about it, I assume?
I tell them that I don't believe we'll see it in their lifetime or my lifetime, and I don't think we will. And even if we do, like, they'll be running between Phoenix and Los Angeles on a dry, flat road where the climate's good. Like, they'll never run up in the Northwest and stuff like that. I don't see them ever managing, mountain passes in the snow and stuff like that. Not in the next couple 100 years, I wouldn't think.
I just remembered our conversation I had with Mark from Trucking Answers a while ago. I grew up in Israel. I'm watching American movies, 80s movies, 90s movies, action movies, and throughout there was a theme of the image of a truck driver back in the maybe 70s, 80s, and 90s of this sort of very patriotic, maybe American or North American occupation where, it's a strong, usually strong guy who is very knowledgeable, who can fix an engine and stop, on the side of the road and help you out. Sort of this romanticized image, and I think that's gone from Hollywood pretty much completely. I haven't seen a cool image of trucking in Hollywood in I don't know how long. Why do you think that happened? What changed there?
I don't know, but I think you're right. I think there was a huge image shift, and I'm not sure why that is. I don't know whether it increased because the truck drivers changed, or there were a whole lot more unprofessional truck drivers than there were professionals all of a sudden. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That perception has changed. I think it's sad that it's changed, and there are still guys out there that will help you. If you get a flat tire, they'll wheel it on over and help you. But even something like these ELDs now, they're even the old guys, the guys that want to help, are on a time clock, and they can't be wasting time on the side of the road. I don't think that's right, but they answer to an ELD. They've got so far they've got to get. They can't run over anymore, and I think even stuff like that has hurt because the drivers can't stop the way they used to and help. I think a lot of the kids that are growing up now would rather work in Silicon Valley than fly a plane or drive a truck. I think that's where everybody wants to be. And I forget, Kathy was saying the other day that a young kid's ambition now is to be a YouTube star of all things. That's a career course they think they'd like to have. Never would have occurred to us, but people are changing. Times are changing.
I mean, I'm 31, so I hate to use the phrase kids these days because I'm 31. But I have a sister. She's of that age group. She's 18 years old. Or she's 19 years old. So I've talked to some of her friends, and you're right. Some kids want to be influencers or YouTubers, but I think they're not realizing that first of all, the chance of succeeding in this field, it's very low because there are so many different, alternatives to any given channel. Yeah. But also, you can't just have a channel without being knowledgeable on the topic that you are discussing. Like, you couldn't be doing what you're doing unless you were pretty damn good at trucking for a long time, right? Like, if you started YouTube at 16 years old about trucking, I don't think much would come of it because it would be pointless. So I think that's what people are missing. It's like you need to be good at something first, and then that credibility is going to carry over and people are going to reciprocate, right? But otherwise, you're just going to sit there and talk about things you don't understand.
Well, I'm discouraged. I don't watch YouTube particularly, and especially the trucking channels. But when I have, and I click every once in a while if I see something new that I don't recognize, and it concerns me. There are so many guys out there with no experience or virtually no experience out there passing out advice too. And that drives me nuts too. I could list a couple of channels that do that where the guys, their guys are barely out of diapers and they're passing out advice. That bothers me. I don't watch any of the channels. It's funny you mentioned Mark. He's about the only one I can stand to watch. Yeah. And the rest of them I have no use for.
Yeah, for me to have a channel like yours, I would need to trust myself immensely that I really, really know what I'm talking about. And that's the only way I would have the courage to give advice, because like you said, like, I don't understand how somebody can really feel confident to give advice without thinking like maybe that's going to kill somebody. Like maybe someone's going to implement that and someone's going to get hurt,
There's a girl on YouTube right now that's a company driver. She hasn't been a company driver more than a couple of years, and she's giving advice on how to start your own trucking company. She'd have no clue, but yet she's giving advice on how to go about it.
Is there anything that's coming out with you guys at SmartTrucking that you kind of want to talk about? Anything new and exciting, or any kind of initiatives, cool videos coming up?
We're going to do, or try to get into more collaboration type streams and videos with other people in the industry that we feel are valuable as far as information is concerned. That's the direction we're going to try to go here next. Yeah. So and we've done one interview with Mark from Trucking Answers. I botched it, so we have to do it over, but he was kind of our trial example initially. We've got to redo that one, but
yeah.